Hi there, my name's Kelsey, and today we're going to be making a simple Simon game with Scratch. So in case you don't know what a Simon game is, essentially there's 4 colored squares in this game screen over here. And they're going to flash in a pattern. Then the player needs to click on the squares in the pattern that they flashed in originally. If they get it right, then another square is added. And if they get it wrong, the game's over. So this is an intermediate level project for those who are new to Scratch, because it uses operators and booleans, as well as a lot of variables and lists. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to need to do is make our square sprites. So to do that, I'm just going to go to Paint, and I'm just going to make some squares. They could be any size because we can resize them later. But for my colors, I'm going to do a red one, a green one, a blue one, and a yellow one. So you're going to start by making a darker version of it. Then if you right click, you can duplicate it. And for this one, we're just going to make a bright version. So this is what the square is going to look like once it is turned on or made to look like it's flashing. So see, if we were to alternate between them really quick, it would look like they're flashing. So then what we're going to do is you can come down here and you can duplicate it if you want. So in this case, I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to change the color. I'm going to make it green, but I'm going to make it kind of dark. And then I'm going to make the exact same thing, same green, just a lot brighter. And you can do the exact same thing for your yellow and blue squares. So you'll see I'm coming over here, making it blue, but I'm making it a bit of a dark blue. And then over here, I'll make the bright version. And now I'm just going to make the yellow one, which again, same process. Just different brightnesses so that they look like they're flashing. And the reason I'm making the dimmer one first is because the default position is going to be off, and then they're going to get bright later on. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to position them. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to change the size of these to 50 because I want them a little bit smaller than they are. Actually, let's go maybe like 70. There we go. That's a bit of a better size. So I'm just going to go in and change these all to 70. Let's make that a 7. And because this game doesn't have any moving components, we don't need to worry about setting them to a specific location when we start. So we just need to place them where we want them to begin, and then they'll be good from there. So I'm just going to place them where I want them. And then we can begin. So I realize that this yellow one looks a little bit like the green one. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this color slightly and make it slightly more, there we go, slightly more yellow. And now I'm just going to tone it down a little bit. The yellow one you might not need to have quite as dark as the others because it might be a little harder to see. But anyway, now we're going to get started on the code. So for a lot of the game code, we're going to do it in this backdrop section because it'll be kind of running in the background. So to start, the first thing we're going to do is drag out an event, and we'll do when I receive, and we're going to create a new message. This one we're going to call add. So we're going to add that, and then we have to do 2 things. We need to make a variable. We'll call it score. And this is the only variable we're going to want to show up. All of them I'm going to be setting as invisible, like that, to delete them. But we want score to show up. And then we're also going to make a list and call it sequence. So now that we've done that, all we need to do is do set score to, and then down here, there's a length of sequence. And we're just going to set score equal to the length of sequence. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to wait a second. So that'll just time everything out, give us a little bit of time. And then now we need to make one other variable. We're going to call this random. And basically what random will do is it will choose one of these squares randomly and make it flash. So what I'm going to do here in this case is I'm going to do set random to, and then from our operators, we have pick random 1 to 10. We're going to do that, but because there's only 4 squares instead of 10, we're going to change the 10 to a 4. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to drag out 4 of our if statements. So these will be, each square will have an if statement to control whether it flashes or not. So the first thing we're going to do is go to operators, and we're just going to grab some of these equal to operators for each of these little diamond shapes. So I'm just going to put all of those in there. And then for each one, we'll go down to variables. And we're just going to drag random is equal to, and we'll put a number in there. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, and 4. So what this will do is it's basically saying if the randomly selected number is equal to a certain one, then it'll make that color flash. So in this case, what I'm going to do is we're going to put one of these add thing to sequences inside each if statement. But instead of thing, we're going to add the color name. So the first one I'm going to do is green. And then after that, I'll do red. Then I'll do yellow. And finally, blue. So that will just make sure that if random is 1, then the green one will flash, and so on. So then at the end, all we're going to do is we're going to do broadcast, and we're going to make a new message. This one we're going to call play sequence. And this will just make it so that it will play the order that these squares are going to flash in. Okay? So now that we have that section done, we're actually going to get on to coding our sequence. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do when I receive and change that to play sequence. Then we need to make a new variable. We're going to call this playing sequence. And again, we're going to make that invisible. And what we're going to do is set playing sequence. Oh, that didn't clip on. And we're going to set it to true because you know when we receive play sequence, the sequence is going to play, which is why it's true. And then we're going to make one other variable. We're going to call it I. You could call it whatever you want. I'm just calling it I for simplicity. And what we're going to do is we're going to set I to 1. So this will basically represent what number in the sequence, how far along we are. And now we have a couple of control blocks that we're going to do. First, we're going to use our repeat until. And what we're going to put in here is we're going to do until I is greater than the length of the sequence. So we're going to go down to variables and do I. And then we'll scroll down here to our list. And remember, we have our length of sequence block. And under that, what we're going to do is we're going to add a wait 1 second block because we want it to be spread out, although not too far. So I'm going to do, let's do 0.2 seconds. And just let me move this over so that we can see it all. Okay, so now that we have that done, we're ready to add a bunch of if statements. And these are going to control which lights flash. So I'm just going to add in 4 right here. Make sure that they're going inside of your repeat until loop. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to do an equals here from our operators. And we're going to go down to list. And down here, you'll see we should have a block item blank of sequence. So that's going to go just inside this first thing. But instead of a blank, all we're going to do is we're going to do I. Item I of sequence is equal to, and then I'm going to do the same order I did on this add block over here. So I'm going to do green first. And then what we're going to do is inside there, all we're going to do is we're going to broadcast one other message and wait. So in this case, I'm going to do new message and I'm going to call it flash green. So what that will do is that will just cue the green light to flash. And I'm just going to duplicate this section here. Whoops. I duplicated the wrong thing. This whole green operator, and just put it in each of these little diamonds because it's convenient. You can do it if you want, just right click on it. Otherwise, you're free to make it on your own. And now I'm just going to make my broadcast messages for each of these. So change green. Next, we're going to do red, and then yellow, and then blue. So now we're going to change that to flash red. And then we'll make another one for yellow. That would be, you guessed it, flash yellow. And so on. So basically, this whole section is just going to control what the orders of the colors are and when they're going to flash. So here we're going to do flash blue. And there we go. We're done with that part. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go on to make the code for each of our squares. So we have our play sequence and we have our add right here. So now we're going to go on to our red square to start. So the first thing we're going to need to do is define what happens when we receive flash in whatever color. In this case, it would be red. So I'm going to start with when I receive, and because this is the red tile, I'll do flash red. Then what we want it to do is we're going to go to the next costume. I'm going to grab out 2 of these because we're going to need 2. And we're just going to wait. So we're going to change costumes and wait. Let's pick how long. We'll do about 0.4 seconds. And then it'll switch back to the previous costume. So you'll see when we do this, you can see on the game screen that the red block flashes. So next what we're going to do is we're going to define what happens when the square is clicked on, because remember the player is going to click on it to match the order that it saw before. So we're going to drag out our when the sprite clicked, and then we need a couple if statements and else if statements. So first we're going to start with an if else, and then we're going to put an if inside of it. And to start, we're just going to go to operators and we're grab an equal sign and stick it in this diamond for the if else. And what we're going to do here is we're going to do if playing sequence is equal to false, then we need to do whatever this is. And I'm just going to double check over here. Oh, okay. So we forgot to add something to the end of our backdrop code. So what we need to do is we are going to change I by 1 underneath this section over here, underneath this last if statement. And then there's just 2 more lines that we need to do. We're going to set our playing sequence to false. This is what I realized we had forgotten earlier. So we're going to set playing sequence to false, and then we're going to make one other variable, and we're going to call it current. And this will just keep track of which of our different flashes or squares we're on. So we're just going to set current to, and we'll set it to 1. So now that we're done with this section, we can go right back to our red square code. So here we have if playing sequence is false, then we want it to do whatever is in this if statement. So what we're going to do is we are going to do if, and then we need one of our operators. We're going to get the equal to one. And then we're going to go back down to our variables, and you'll see we have a block that says if item blank of sequence. So what we're going to do is we just made our current variable. So we're going to take this current variable and put it in that blank. So if item current of sequence is equal to, and now we're just going to do the square color. So in this case, it's red. Then what we're going to do is we are going to change the current by 1. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to broadcast and we're going to broadcast flash red because we want it to flash when we click on it. So now that that's done, all we need to do now, okay, so what I realize I've done now is I have confused our if statements. So you see what we should have instead is we'll have one big if statement where we check if playing sequence is false, then we're going to do if item current of sequence, and that's the if else. And then these pieces of code are going to go right under that. That we have if it's playing the sequence, then it will do this if else statement. And then it will change current by 1, broadcast flash red. And then we're going to check if current is greater than the length of the sequence. Because if it is, then we're just going to broadcast add. So we're just going to come down here and find our length of sequence. So if current is greater than the length of sequence, all we're going to do is broadcast add. And then otherwise, something's gone wrong. So in that case, we're going to make a new message and we're just going to call it game over. So this is what happens when the player, say it was flashed red, but they click yellow instead. This is what's going to happen then. So these two pieces of code are basically what are going to make the button run. So you'll see it will flash, and then we can also control how it works like this. So what we're going to do now is we can take this code and add it to some of our other sprites. So let's do that. First, we need to open the backpack, and then all you're going to do is just drag your code down into there, and you'll see it will make a copy of it. So what we can do is we can go, let's say, to our green sprite, and we'll just drag them right in. So I've got one of those and one of these. So of course, because this is our green square instead of red, we're just going to change anything that says red to green. So item current of sequence, we're going to do green. And then instead of flash red, we're going to flash green. And we're just going to do the same thing for every one of these other squares. So when I receive flash blue, because this is our blue square, if item in series is blue, and then we want to broadcast flash blue. So as you can see, I'm just going through making these changes. If you don't make these changes correctly, you'll see it will flash the wrong color, which can be a little bit confusing, but it's fairly easy to go in and change. And of course, you're free to just make this code the same way we did before with dragging the blocks. It's just a lot more convenient this way. So right now, I'm just going to go in and double check that I've changed everything around to blue. And this one, everything is green. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we are going to make our when green flag clicked code. So this is what's going to happen when the green flag is clicked for every one of these sprites. So the first thing we're going to want to do is just drag this when green flag clicked. And then all I'm going to do for these squares is we're going to choose the initial costume. And for all of them, the dim one is costume 1, and we want them to start in the like switched off. So we're going to just do switch costume 2, and we'll choose costume 1. And I'm just going to go in and do this for every one of these sprites so that they all start and it looks like their colors are off. So you'll see I'm just going into each of these, doing that exact same thing. You might be able to go without this, but it is a lot more convenient to do it this way. So I highly recommend doing this so that your costumes don't get all messed up. And of course, if you did your brighter costume first, then you'd be doing when green flag clicked, set costume to costume 2 instead, or whatever it's called. I'm just starting with 1 because that's what my dim costume is. Okay, so now we're going to do the green flag pressed code for our backdrop. So this one is fairly simple. Just let me scroll up so that we have a bit more room. We're just going to do when green flag clicked. All we're going to do is come down to this, and we are going to find down here, delete all of sequence. So that will just clear our entire sequence. And then we're going to broadcast add. So this will make it start again. So this is just to make sure that you don't have anything left over from your previous game, and it'll just completely restart. Okay, so now we have all of this done, and we just have one last sprite to make, which is our game over sprite. And we're going to make this and make the code for it. So to start, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here to choose a sprite. I could draw my own, but I know we have a nice X sprite here that will work just well for me. And I'm going to find it. So it should be down here somewhere. You'll see we have an X. And I'm going to go to costumes. I only need the red one. And because I think it looks a little plain, I'm going to add some writing. So I'm going to do game over. And you'll see, obviously, it's very big and definitely not my favorite color. So I'm going to change it to white, shrink it a little bit, and I'm going to put it right on the X. You're free to make your game over symbol whatever you want it to be. I'm just going kind of simple with this. And there we go. We have our game over sprite. So this is really simple. We're just going to start with our when green flag clicked. And all this is going to do is it's just going to hide because we don't want it to show up unless the game is lost. And now, because remember how we made our game over event earlier for when the game is over. So we're going to do when I receive game over. Then we want it to basically come to the front, which is what we're going to do, go to front layer. And then we want it to show itself because it's been hidden this whole time. So we're going to do show. And then finally, there's just one other thing we need to do is we want to stop the game. So what we're going to do is we're just going to grab this stop all, and that will just stop the entire game from running. So now that we have that done, it's time to test our game. Although the first thing I want to do is I see it's a little bit small there. So I'm going to make it, let's do 500 times the size. And then I'll just place it right in the middle where I want it. So now let's test our game. And you'll see it flashes yellow once, and we'll click on it, and then it does yellow and blue. So we'll do yellow and blue. And you can see our score counting up here. But what would happen if I pressed the wrong button? So we had yellow, blue, and red. What if I press green? Then we'll see the game's over. So this is how we make a simple Simon game. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any issues with your code, feel free to go back, check it against the video, see if anything is off, and have fun with this.